Another day, another saga of One Piece down as I've finished Sky Island and simultaneously crossed 200 episodes, which is no mere feat, and I can now safely say that One Piece is the longest I've ever watched one anime, just barely surpassing My Hero by about 30 or so episodes. As I read the comments on my Alabasta video, things seemed pretty split on whether I should watch, read, or even skip Sky Island entirely, but I went ahead and watched it while also keeping my expectations low, which, in hindsight, was definitely a good idea. So as always, sit back, relax, and listen as I give my thoughts on the entirety of the Sky Island saga. As I was pulling together notes for this video, I only then realized just how much filler this saga has compared to the other two I've seen. I mean, there's 3 whole arcs spanning 19 of the 71 episodes, which I know is criminally insane, and I also know it probably only gets worse. Rather than tackling the arcs in order, this time I'm going to talk about all the filler first and then move on to the actual meat of the saga in Jaya and Skypiea. Overall, this filler was absolutely atrocious. Okay, well, maybe that's a bit over-exaggerated. To say it was atrocious would imply that it was borderline unwatchable, which I don't think was the case at all, and honestly, I've liked the filler up until this point. I thought it drug on a little at times, but it was mostly just, fun little side adventures that helped build my relationship and enjoyment of the Straw Hats as a group. Goat Island wasn't too terrible since it was short, sweet, and to the point, and I don't have too terribly much to say about it other than it was neat. And same goes for Ruluka Island. It was a very neat concept, and getting involved with time travel, and I didn't see that twist coming, so I guess it evens things out. While I don't have a ton to say about those arcs, I do feel that they added something to the world building of the series and seemed to make a lot more sense when tied into the main narrative. The flow of the story was natural and didn't feel like it needed to maintain any kind of status quo before returning to the real plot. This pseudo-flattery cannot in any way, shape, or form be said about G8, the filler arc that comes after all the main plot, and I also have a lot more to say about this one since it's fresh in my mind. To say I enjoyed G8 would be a lie, and I think the biggest reason is because it's not what the rest of the filler this saga was. Nothing about it felt natural since I knew the whole time that nothing was gonna matter. This is especially the case when the Straw Hats have a clear shot to escape, but end up making the stupid decision to go back for the gold because it's what good pirates would do, when in reality it's because everything has to return to that post-Skypiea status quo. I did my best to binge through G8 because I decided early on that if I was gonna watch One Piece, I was gonna watch all of it, boring filler included. So I guess I kinda did this to myself. And I think this art felt a lot longer too because I was excited to finish Sky Island and move on to Water 7 since that's finally in glorious HD and has an opening that I've been looking forward to since the beginning. That's not to say G8 is without its interesting moments, though. I did enjoy Chopper's interaction with Dr. Kabato and how he encouraged her to step up and save lives as a doctor, even if it was outside of her wheelhouse, and this is probably the only part I genuinely enjoyed since everyone else was just kind of fumbling around trying to escape. There were some funny gags here and there, but not enough to save the arc as a whole for me. I cried tears of joy when I finished the last episode because my chains had been broken and I was free from G8, the Sky Island saga, and the 480p resolution. A lot of these older anime struggle with filler and bad pacing. Dragon Ball is notorious for it, and obviously so is One Piece. And in my humble opinion, what makes filler good is whether or not it's an enjoyable experience. If you can make the filler episodes just as charming as the main episodes, then I don't mind that it doesn't progress the main story. I had this same filler discussion last year with Demon Slayer's Hashira training arc and how Ufotable added a bunch of new content to pad the season's runtime, and I think that filler worked because it was able to add to the overall story and it was an enjoyable watching experience. And while some One Piece filler is that, G8 was definitely not, at least in my humble opinion. But that's enough about filler. Let's get to talking about what you're here for, the main event of Jaya and Skypiea. Let me get one thing straight. One Piece sagas start out with some of the most insane, out-of-left-field stuff I've ever seen in an anime. For example, Sky Island starts with a giant ship falling out of the sky onto the Going Merry. Like, who makes this stuff up? Oh, well, I guess Oda does. Speaking strictly on the canon content of this saga, it was good. I definitely enjoyed watching it, but it's nowhere near my favorite out of what I've seen so far. And I'll elaborate more on this as we go, but there seemed to be a lot of parts where things just dragged on and on and on, and making it almost a slog to get through sometimes. The Jaya arc didn't suffer from this as much as Skypiea did, but that's also because it's a setup arc, so things kind of have to keep moving. And the one thing I did hear from other One Piece fans is how much this saga adds to the world building and overall plot, which Jaya does in and of itself. Doflamingo's here. A whole lot of new characters are introduced, and it builds off of the end of Alabasta since we get whisked away to the world government capital and see the top brass trying to figure out who's going to replace Crocodile. And I appreciate this because it builds into the overarching narrative and things become a lot bigger than just the Straw Hat's goal to find the One Piece. Mihawk's also back. There's also a lot of powerful people involved. Some I already knew about, like Mihawk, and others I knew of but hadn't seen yet, like Doflamingo. And I still find it so interesting how the world government uses pirates to curb and contain the other pirates rather than just doing it themselves. And that's not to say the Marines are weak either. They clearly have a lot of skilled and powerful people mixed in with all of the bumbling idiots who do stuff for comedy, but it's not because they can't do it, it's because they don't want to, which is a key distinction. But it does seem like Blackbeard really wants to fill that vacant spot in the Warlords, which also may explain why Ace was looking for him during the Alabasta arc. And yes, I know that guy is Blackbeard. It's not very subtle, although I guess there is like a name drop a couple episodes later, so it's fine. It's always so funny to me when Luffy runs into these massive pirates like Blackbeard, but since he has no idea who they are, he just treats them like any other person, and given Luffy's character, he probably would have acted that way regardless. And I did appreciate that we got to see a bit more of Luffy, and by extension Zoro's true character, in how they interacted with Bellamy and his crew in the bar little after he meets Blackbeard. I was right there with Nami, hoping that two of the strongest Straw Hats would do something against the blatant disrespect, but then when it's all said and done, I understood why. Some people just aren't worth fighting, especially when you have nothing to gain from it. It's a big improvement for Luffy, someone who up to this point wanted to throw hands with everyone he met, but not Bellamy, because of course this does come back full circle when Bellamy gives Luffy a reason to fight him by stealing Cricket's gold and then promptly getting One Punch Man out of existence. So satisfying. And this parallels back to the very beginning where we see Shanks do the exact same thing, which is what Luffy was emulating since that's who he looks up to and wants to be. Shanks is back. Speaking of, Shanks did appear again for a solid couple minutes just to remind us that he's alive, and now he's off to meet that guy from The One Piece is Real meme. I know he's a lot more important than that, but that's the only context I have right now. And there was also a quick bit with Buggy, Alvida, and Ace, which is an interesting combo, given that they're all looking for Luffy, and it leads me to believe that we're building up to something crazy, otherwise Oda wouldn't have thought to introduce all of these new characters, or even remind us of the old existing ones, and it's all gonna come together here in a few arcs, and I'm trying not to let my cultural knowledge of the series influence my theories. Shifting in a totally different direction, the Shifting in a totally different direction, the Sarayama Alliance was very cool, and I appreciated their involvement in the story, even if just to fix up the Going Merry and then tell the Straw Hats where to go, which is up. Mont Blanc Cricket is the antithesis of Bellamy in that he still believes in having dreams and is actively chasing his own. Even if it seems futile or that it may never happen, he still chases the truth on whether Noland was lying about the City of Gold, and he'll chase that dream regardless, even if it kills him. While I did appreciate getting to see the flashback and explanation of Noland's story of finding the City of Gold and how, Jaya got thrown up in the sky with the knock-up stream, I honestly thought it was filler because of where it was placed in the arc. It was right before Luffy's final confrontation with Eneru, so I thought maybe it's additional filler since they caught up, but nope, it's legit, it's canon. Seeing Nolan's side of the story was necessary because it helped explain the conflict between the Shandorans and the Skypeans, which really is just a thinly veiled metaphor for the Native Americans and Christopher Columbus if you really think about it. And I mean, you don't even really have to think about it that hard, you know, but Nolan showed up and said, the human sacrifices will stop, then proceeded to radically improve the Shandorans' way of life, and that is based. Now, enough beating around the bush. It's time I talk about the main arc of Skypiea. I think it somehow simultaneously is the best arc in the saga while also having the worst pacing. Much like my complaints with G8, Skypiea had some sections that felt really drawn out, and that made it kind of a slog to get through. That said, I can see both sides of the argument on whether you should skip the saga or not. On the one hand, it's kind of a bottle story that takes place in the sky and almost feels like a bit of a detour. But on the other hand, there's a lot of world building between Upper Yard being a part of Jaya, or Robin finding the poneglyph at the end, while Godfall notes that there may be some strange connection between Gold D. Roger and Monkey D. Luffy, and all these people with D in their names. What does that mean? I don't know. I guess you'll have to find out. Do I personally think Skypiea is worth skipping? No. If Oda included it in the story, then it's important and there for a reason, whether that be now or at a later point down the line. I feel like I'm forgetting to talk about something. Oh yeah, Eneru, you know, the main villain of the arc. As I've said before, I'm watching One Piece dubbed, and Eneru is voiced by J. Michael Tatum. And what's even funnier, though, is that I was rewatching through Attack on Titan dubbed at the same time. So to go from megalomaniac Eneru to incredible leader Erwin, both names starting with E, was a little amusing. Eneru is honestly kind of hard for me to place in terms of the other villains I've encountered so far. I like his devil fruit powers, but that's about it. He didn't really move the needle in terms of becoming my favorite villain, and that title still goes to Arlong and Crocodile. I can't pick one, they're just both so good. Eneru and the Skypiea arc as a whole does have this very shallow idea of what it means to be God. Little g God, by the way. Now, let's make that distinction very clear. Eneru sees himself as a god because of his sheer power and the abilities his mantra gives him, making him virtually omnipotent, which from a very simplistic standpoint would make him a god. But it's just that, a very simplistic standpoint. And you might say, well, he's not really God, that's just what they call the ruler of Skypiea. And yeah, you would absolutely be correct. However, that does not excuse the terminology being used here. Eneru also seems pretty hell-bent on referring to himself as a god, not just the ruler of Skypiea. Godfall is much closer to what a god actually should be, given the characteristics he has. He cares about the Skypeans and wants to bring an end to the conflict with the Shandorans. He fights for what is right and issues justice to those who deserve it. Now, he's not perfect, as no man truly is, but compared to Eneru, he looks like a saint. As a Christian, I think this arc poses the interesting question of what does it mean to be a god, and is something I thought about the whole time I was watching. People worship Eneru out of fear and terror of what he'll do to them, but compare that to Big G God, where we worship him out of love and reverence for who he is. Being a god isn't just about how much raw strength you have, because power is fleeting and eventually Eneru will be past his prime. Big G God has no rival and no equal, and he truly is worthy of our honor and praise because he made the entire universe, us included, and shows us unending love and mercy even when we wander astray. I know One Piece's take on gods are very different because A, it's set in an entirely fictional universe, and B, it's made in Japan, which has a very different cultural mindset, especially when it comes to religion, but alas, this is just what I took away from it as a Christian who's watching the series. Now, guys, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't have much more to say about Skypiea or even the saga as a whole. I had a really hard time writing this script because my thoughts really did just boil down to, yeah, it's cool. Some parts were slow, but I'm glad I didn't skip it. And from what I've heard, Sky Island sets up a lot of stuff for later in the future that'll come full circle later, and that's why it doesn't make a lot of sense now. So I guess we'll see how that all plays out. Now I am free to move on to Water 7 and the glorious high-definition episodes that await me, and as far as I've heard from friends and other One Piece fans, Water 7 is going to be huge in terms of plot, so we'll see how that video goes when the time comes. It's also, you know, just only 119 episodes! Yeah, I may have to break that up into multiple parts, who's to say? But anyway, feel free to head down to the comments and let me know your thoughts on the Sky Island saga. Also, please, do your best to keep spoilers out of the comments, please, since I'm trying to go into things as blind as I can. While you're down there, you can subscribe so you don't miss any of my future One Piece content, including something new I'll be doing from here on out, so stay tuned for that. I'll talk about that in a second. I also want to give a massive shout out to all the channel members, since your support is what makes these videos possible, and I greatly appreciate it. Now you might be wondering, what is that other content you're talking about? Well, something I want to try doing, I'll try it with Sky Island and we'll see how it goes and go from there. But if a One Piece video drops right on a Wednesday, that first Friday, I want to start doing a live stream, like Q&A, come talk about One Piece with me. It should be up right now if you're watching this video on release day, not early if you're a channel member. It should already be up there, so you can go set your notifications and stuff. But I want that to be a, hey, let's watch through my video if you haven't seen it already. I'll give some, you know, things that popped into my head after the fact as I was like gathering footage or whatever. You guys can ask me questions about it, ask about specific things, and just kind of have like a good community engagement time. Because I just think that would be cool. Because sometimes, like Sky Island, I don't have a ton to say in a scripted video format, but I might have more to say if I get Q&A and people start jogging my memory of like, oh, that thing did happen. So that's something I want to try doing from here on out in the future. We'll see how the first one goes and then go from there. If you want to watch more, you can check out my One Piece Chronicles playlist with all of my videos on the series, or this other video that the algorithm thinks you want to watch. So until next time, I'll see you around. Peace out.